Hello, everyone. Yes, it is that fabulous time again, Wednesday morning. We are here getting ready to rock and roll, learn, be inspired. But if this is your first time joining us, hello, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicating to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. So on that note, you guys got to hear my dog, and we get to say hi to Lori. Hey, Lori, how's it going?
We didn't hear the dog. We missed out. But guys, I got to tell you, she's got the cutest dog. She really does. Someday we'll have to convince her to let us see the cute dog because I saw him once. Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. We're going to have a great show. So no further ado, let me get started with my sharing for today. I just can't believe we're already mid into July. I was looking at the other day and I said, I got to get my August calendar going soon. I don't know what's happening with all this time, but we still got some shows in July. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So Megan Johnson's coming back on. As I told you before, she's came on to talk about her company, Stradivarius. Now, what she does is sales training and metrics, etc. And when she was talking about her company, so many of you asked sales questions. And you know what? Like it or not, you're in a small business, you're your salesperson. You say, I never was a salesperson. I don't want to be a salesperson. Well, guess what? You are. So I've asked her to come on and give that sales for the no salesperson, training where you get to ask questions. She's going to tell you metrics, how to, calculate things and good approaches for your situation. And then the end of the month, we're going to finish off with Ashley Arnold. She has this cutest little cart. It's a cart she takes to farmers market, flea markets, etc., called Lady Cakes. And her show was one of the most popular ones because it not only talked about the product and her cool little cart, which is just adorable, guys, but also how she had used my financial templates and really got a great understanding of her company. So I wanted to bring that show back because it was great. So that's what we'll be seeing at the end of the month. Okay, Lori's Corner, where you guys know I rant and rage on this one. Here is Lori's Corner today. Service businesses, your time is raw material. So here we go. If you're a service-based business, and many of you are, I want to talk to you today about something I see all the time that quietly hurts your profitability. Now, also, guys, I love service businesses. I love the solopreneurs. They're the most profitable. I'm always talking about that. But this is something that I haven't talked enough about. So often you guys tell me, I don't have any raw materials, so my costs are low. Now, technically, financial accounting, this is true. You don't have raw materials. You don't put that on your tax return. You don't put that on your P&L. But from a managerial accounting, think CFO, it's not how you want to think about your business. So here's a better way to look at it. Ready, guys? Your raw material is time. If you were manufacturing chairs, you would never dream of not knowing how much the wood cost or how long it takes to build one. You'd be shocked if somebody told you that they were pricing chairs without tracking those two things. Yet many of you bid on projects, quote flat fees, or charge hourly without ever really tracking how much time you or your team actually spend. Then you wonder why you're not making the money you thought you were. I see it constantly. When I get clients to actually track their time for even a couple of weeks, the numbers are often eye-opening. What they thought was 75 or 100 an hour sometimes turns out to be 30 or less once we do the real math. I've seen many people find out they're making under minimum wage when they calculate it. So here's the way to think about it. Time is your inventory. And unlike wood or supplies, you can't buy more of it. Once it's gone, it's gone. This is why I work with so many service businesses to put simple systems in place, even basic timesheets or project tracking, so they can see exactly where their time is going and whether their pricing is actually working. Here's the bottom line, guys. If your business model is built on selling your time or your team's time, then time is your most valuable raw material. Don't let it go unmeasured and unmanaged. Track it, understand it, and price accordingly. Your profitability depends on it. You got this. Start treating your time like the valuable resource it is. All right, guys, let's jump into today's show. We have a new guest. Greg Horos is a staunch small business advocate and owner and co-founder of LOCALI, a multi-unit deli market hybrid quick restaurant concept. He served as chief operations officer for over 15 years. Greg's key areas of expertise include budgeting, cost controls, labor purchasing, vendor relations, and supply chain strategies. He's also well versed in contract, lease, financial negotiations, legal strategy, cost benefit analysis, inventory control systems, and risk management planning. Greg is now his fifth year as an SBDC advisor. Yes, he's an SBDC advisor, guys. That means you can meet with him. His information is going to be in the chat continuously throughout the show. He joined PCR Business Finance in 2023. He founded Big Catch Consulting, which helps develop customized growth strategies for small to medium-sized business. His focus areas are retail, QSR restaurant, and service-based businesses. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? Good to see
Oh my
you.
God,
Yeah.
it's so good to have you on the show.
Yeah.
Your bio reads like kind of a curriculum for an MBA in small business, which is awesome. Okay. Because as I'm
It's
reading that,
okay.
I'm thinking,
Mm,
okay, issue for small business, issue for small business, issue for small business.
mm.
All of that is
Yeah,
something that many small businesses struggle with. So it's going to be fabulous to have your wealth of information on the
it's an
show.
honor to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lori.
So let's start out. You focused on restaurants. Was this something you wanted to do since you were in high school, or what started your
Oh,
career
no,
path?
absolutely not. No, actually, I had a 15-year career as a business owner, QSR concept in Southern California. It was a roller coaster ride because everything that could possibly happen to a small business happened to us. We're talking about fires, we're talking about robberies, armed robberies, we're talking about theft, we're talking about landlord issues, we're talking about neighborhood issues. We were in the thick of it during COVID, and two of our locations were in those hotbeds, downtown LA and Hollywood, right by the 101. So when all of that civil unrest was going on, we were right in the middle of it. So, anything that could have happened to our concept happened to us, and it was a trial by fire. And I share this with my clients. I say, as entrepreneurs, small businesses are the engines that drive this economy, but you're the bravest people on the planet because you're not answering to anyone. These circumstances are just getting thrown at you left and right, and we have to pivot and we have to move and we have to do it quickly in order to survive. And that's why being an advisor, particularly with PCR SBDC and Long Beach SBDC and Pasadena City College, I mean, I've met some wonderful, wonderful people like you, and we talked about Brad earlier, and Don and Colette and China and Briogeny, the whole team. Great advisors, great people, but the clients and their stories, they keep me tied to what's going on in their ears to the street because they're doing this every day. So their struggles are helping me help them. And what I hear from one client is going to help another client. Or if a strategy works, I can apply it to someone else's strategy. And you'd be surprised how similar businesses are. A restaurant can be having the same struggles when they're barely trying to make, $100,000 a year as an attorney that's making well over $500,000, $600,000 a year because there's operational fallacies and they're hitting a bottleneck. So when I work with those higher end, upper echelon clients, I do use the strategies from my other clients and I incorporate it in their operational protocols to help them with guardrails. So we can go into that. It's very exciting. It's an exciting way to kind of touch base with everybody in today's economic climate about what's going on. We're going through so many changes and there's confusion. But the way to kind of solidify your business practice is to have strong operational protocols and a command of your numbers and cost.
Okay, that's music to my ears. Command of numbers and costs. Everybody knows that all I ever talk about is you need to know your numbers. So I've got so many different angles to go with this. First of all, I want to make a note and have the audience. I talk about this, but not enough. One of the unique aspects about our locations on SBDCs is as advisors, we're business owners and have been business owners, and many of us still do. We're, a lot of times think, we're government employees, et cetera. But no, we're in the trenches right with you. And it's not just me, it's my colleagues as well. And I just wanted to make that mention on the SBDC. Another thing I thought about as you were speaking, Greg, it's like, I always tell people I'm old. I've been at this game for a long time. And after a while, things kind of become known. It's like, okay, I'm going to have a recession, then I'm going to have this, then I'm going to have an economic fallout. There's going to be some new technologies. But over the last 5 years, it's like, okay, I'm going to have COVID. Everybody's going to shut down. Then we're going to have fires. Then we're going to, the amount of issues that small businesses face are not the kind of issues that I've ever seen. So it's a definite different playing ground. Where I'd like to go from here, and we're going to go all over the place, but I want to pick up on just one of the words you spoke about. It's another one of my soapbox things. So I'm going to explain it and then let you take it from there. And it has to do with the operation processes. What I'm going to first mention from what I seen when I was doing turnarounds. I did turnarounds as a CFO for over a decade. And that would be companies that were anywhere from like 5 million up to 60 million, some of them a little bit less than that. And what happens when you start a company is you don't automatically think I need to have processes like a big corporation would, documented, well-written, identified processes. And you end up hiring Mary, you tell Mary, and then Jeff is over here, and you start this communication. Well, that ends up being the actual failure because first of all, you bring on more people, you don't set proper processes in place. And then if you suddenly grow, I don't mean overnight because nobody grows overnight, but you suddenly get an opportunity and you have to hire, you don't have a manual to hand anybody. And so where I was in the turnarounds, I would see where people would grow and they would outgrow their lack of infrastructure. And then they had to go backwards to get the infrastructure in place to then grow again. And I try to talk to our small companies today. I'm going to almost done, almost passing this to you, and tell them you need to get the infrastructure in today. Well, that's my one point. But then what I also find, I'm giving you both to go with, Greg, is many of the younger, now in this I do mean younger in age. I always say when I say younger entrepreneur, I mean new entrepreneurs, but I do mean younger in age. They were brought up not working in corporate America and don't even understand what the word infrastructure means. They're used to going online, clicking, and it shows up, but they're really not sure how it showed up. So they say, I'm going to start a business. I don't need any customer service. I don't need any of this. So I think we don't talk enough about what is operations, what is infrastructure, and why it matters to even the solopreneur.
Sure.
Your turn, Greg. Take it.
So, I think it could be summarized in, when we have our employees representing our business, right? They're never going to put into the amount of care that the owner does, but we need to provide the proper tools in their toolbox so they can kind of dish out all of the regulatory things that need to happen every day and provide guardrails. Guardrails is something I use in all of my sessions, right? If we're not providing guardrails, employees are just going to naturally do what comes easy to them, which isn't always the best thing for the business. And when you don't have guardrails, what happens? The car is going to veer off the cliff and you're going to have a disaster. So the first thing I do, and I had a session with a client yesterday about operational revamp, is we want to look at what are some of the pain points and how to fix them, and what are some of the one of my clients calls it the everyday drudgery, right? If you're dealing with the everyday grind as the owner, that is pulling you away from the administrative tasks you need to be performing to grow your business. So how do we do that? Well, we need to delegate. And operational bottlenecks, founder bottlenecks do happen on the smaller end with the clients who are doing that small end family, QSR business, or even if you have a farmer's market, right? And they happen with people like I have clients, again, very successful attorneys in different cities. They're all going through the same thing. They're facing operational bottlenecks because they're not efficiently rather delegating responsibilities to their staff members to take those things off of their plate. So it's planning, right? On our part as owners, we need to be good stewards of our business. We need to write out these protocols and then kind of dissect where are we going wrong and is it my customer lead funnel that's not getting addressed? Is my customer service bad? Am I getting these reviews based on poor performance? Is the turnaround time taking too long? Am I experiencing waste because I don't have people processing deliveries or stowage of ingredients or the preparation of ingredients in a timely manner? So it's all of those things, but it's putting it in a systematic staff Bible, right? So we can have operations for them to follow, having a Q&A, having flow charts. I'm really big. I do a webinar on this about forming, operational protocols. So it all begins with the first day. When you hire that person, we've interviewed them, we deem them experienced enough, competent enough to learn. And through training, we should be introducing them day by day. This is front of house. This is back of house. This is operations. This is prep. If you're a food service business, how do we receive deliveries? How do we deal with vendors? How do we separate delivery customers from pickup customers? All of those things need to be broken down in the operations manual so, it can be understood by a second grader. The language has to be very simple, right? We don't want to leave anything to chance. And we also need to put someone in there, whether it's a manager, a senior staff level person who's going to oversee the trainee for a period of time, so they can actually understand the flow of these processes. The last thing you want to do, and I have clients who do this, they hire somebody and they think they got it because, like you said, they anecdotally give them instructions. And for some reason, they think that everybody thinks us as owners, because we're so busy, we always feel that people think the way we do. And I did that in the first few years of my business. And you have to realize that not everybody thinks the same. We have to communicate efficiently. And sometimes that means going over things again and again, repetitively. I have a client who offers quizzes at the end of each training period. So at the end of the shift, 10 minutes before they leave, they're going to answer a brief Q&A with the oversight employee who's going to issue these questions and say, where do you stow this? What is the abbreviation for this in the POS? How do we register this? How is a refund issued? Those simple things over time are going to ingrain the employee into thinking a certain way and getting them to be more efficient.
Absolutely. And I find even if you have no employees and it's just you, for example, with myself, and this more some time ago, because I had so many things for sale, ebooks and stuff all over the place. I had protocols that I would remind myself how I would upload something, how I would go about this, what I would do on check on a daily basis. And even in my tax preparation for my own company, I have little protocols that I have because I do my own W-2s and all that, right? So I'm basically doing payroll, doing taxes, doing everything for myself. And I'm always like, okay, remember the W-2's got to be like this. I think when you write down protocols, even if you're a solopreneur, you become more efficient. You don't have to keep everything in your head. So it opens up space for new thoughts to come in. And if you do then grow, you don't have to, but if you do, you get to hand something to somebody already created. So I think too often the solopreneurs think processes and infrastructure is for someone other than themselves, rather than seeing it as just something they can begin immediately. So I completely agree with you on that. Going into another angle, and I just always want to discuss this with somebody who's maybe seeing it as well. And I see a lot of financials given my area of expertise, so you may not be as exposed to it as much as I am. But Greg, and everybody that's on the show all the time, they know I'm talking about this constantly. The shocking lack of profitability from our clients. And I want to be really clear. It's not that, okay, they're investing in this and then it's going to pay off. They don't understand how much their costs are, their overhead. They don't look at net income. They look at revenue. They then borrow money on their credit card thinking they're investing in their company, but they're really paying for past dues and they're just living on their credit cards. And they're walking around with what I call their little LA Gucci bag. Look at my little LLC. I'm in business, bragging rights, poor as can be, and heading down to disaster.
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of clients that are in bankruptcy, right? So I see it at the end or shutting down. And it's because they get so caught up in the business model, and no one on social media is teaching traditional. I'm calling it traditional now. That's a really weird. I was just going to combine two strangest words right now: traditional CFO analysis. I just was like going, "Where is that coming from?" But I feel like that, the old-fashioned CFO. You got to make money at the end of the day.
Sure.
But what I see too is so many of our companies are literally, and it's a good business model, but it's one you have to be conscious. They outsource everything. Even if they got their own product, they got somebody who manufactures, they got somebody who distributes it, they got somebody that sells it, they got somebody who does that. These people are making the money. They're not, and they're the one that created the product.
Sure.
So I'm really trying to emphasize these small businesses. They've got to go back to the nuts and bolts of calculating numbers,
Mhm.
see when a business model doesn't work. And if you can't make money relatively soon, you're never going to, because your cost is going to go up and your selling price isn't high enough. So let
Sure.
me first ask you, just in general terms, Greg, do you see, or are you concerned, and you don't have to be, don't answer just because I am, that you're seeing a lot of small companies that think their lack of profitability is just how it is and it's a growing pain, when actually it's a structural issue not being addressed?
I am, and honestly, they're not small companies. Some of them, I have clients who have multiple locations, or they have a business that's been
Yeah.
in business for 15, 20 years. They've inherited, it's a legacy business from their parents. I think it's two things. One, it's a lack of understanding of your cost versus your revenues. And then also, especially if you're a food service business, they're not dialed into their profitability margins against what it costs to produce that, and then they're not designing the menu properly. So I do a webinar on this of menu design, and we talk about the cost. Say you're going to make a salad or a sandwich or a pizza or whatever. Everything has to be costed down to the ounce, to the weight, not just by the volume. So we have to
Right.
understand. If it's a pizza, it's the flour, it's the cheese, the sauce, whatever goes into that, the meat portion, right? And that has to be measured. I'm
Yeah.
dealing with a client right now. We were talking about menu costing, and she wasn't even sure if they were measuring the ingredients that go into the food that's being served. So I said, so how do they get those ingredients? She's like, oh, they just eyeball it. I said, that's a major, major problem. Why are we not measuring out these things, particularly when, food costs are rising? We're not quite sure where your profitability is. We have to go back and look at your menu. And again, I have clients who've been in business for many years, and the last time they did a menu costing was a year, 2 years, some say 3 years, some say since I have opened. So, prices rise. We have fuel surcharges that are going through the roof. Things are stabilizing a little bit now, but we're in an uncertain environment. So the only thing we can do, we can't control the economy, but we can control our costs. And we can
Yeah.
look at ingredients. And there's different strategies we can utilize. We can negotiate with vendors. We can have, buy larger portions if we have the storage capacity. We can kind of look at maybe restructuring the measurements of what is served and reducing the amounts of an expensive item, and make up for it with another item. Like if produce is less expensive than the protein, then we cut back a couple ounces on the protein and add more produce. But we can't
Yeah.
do those strategies unless you know your cost. So when I
Yep.
talk with clients, I say, look, here's the worksheet. Let's go through it. Like, let's put all of your items. When I was a food service owner, I would do that. COVID taught me a huge lesson. I was doing it like almost every month. I was just looking and making sure. And then you start to see numbers. It's like the matrix, and zeros and ones start making sense to you. And then you realize your vendor they just sent you a case of something that went up by $1.25. So then I'm on the phone with the vendor, like, why is my case going up? My case price went up 6 months ago. And then you have to go to negotiate. Well, how many cases can you order? Well, I can commit to this many. Well, if you can commit to this many per month, then we can get this, and that brings your cost down to that. But we can't get into those kind of strategies without you first knowing your numbers, about you knowing your sales, about you knowing what you're going to order, what are the dogs, what are the stars, what are the puzzles, what are the plow horses on your menu, and kind of going through each of those things, and then understanding that, we got to look at payroll, right? It's not just your food costs. Your cost of goods is a huge part of it, but we also want to look at rent, and we also want to look at payroll. Those are two things that are really hurting small business owners in this area right now. I mean, I know clients who don't understand why their labor cost is like approaching 40%. And I look as like, well, are we scheduling people accordingly? Are we allocating for, busy foot traffic times, lulls in foot traffic times? Are you pulling out the point of sale reports? Are we going hour by hour? Are we including deliveries and caterings and all of the things that happen within your business? Or are you just kind of winging it and scheduling, three to four people at 6 hours a pop, and then let the chips fall where they may. And I think too, a lot of other people, and this is not just small businesses, Lori. I have larger businesses who are just throwing money into managers, and their labor is now approaching 45, 50%. And when I look at their P&Ls, it's like, why do you have five managers? And why are they all on a salary? And why are all these people getting paid? And why are you only open for dinner service? Like, it's just, numbers always tell the story. And I say this all the time with my clients. We need to know the numbers. And it's funny because I talk about this. This is something Colette, the director of PCR SBDC, always says. She says, geez, I feel like sometimes clients have an allergy to numbers. They get freaked out, right? They just see the spreadsheet and it's like doom and they don't want to look at it. So I think they bury their head in the sand. I think a lot of business owners do that. So you need a business advisor, a coach that's going to help you walk through those things. And that's why it's good to have, lean on your advisor. I have clients who schedule sessions with me, weekly, bi-weekly, and we're constantly looking at P&Ls. We're constantly looking at cost. And we really need to dial in, especially for those clients that are seeking like an SBA loan, right? You know this because of your background. Underwriters are going to look at everything. We're not just going to look at your personal financial statements and your tax returns. We're also going to look at your projections. And those projections can't just be ephemeral. We can't just be pulling numbers out of the sky. They got to be based on sales. And then we have to show how that revenue is going to throw gasoline on the fire and show growth and make you a viable candidate to pay back this loan.
A couple things and I got a whole bunch of notes that I made
Yeah.
it during your last conversation, but I just want to make mention is one of the advantages having someone like yourself who's coming on and talking about the restaurant industry. It's
Mhm.
a perfect sampling because it's a hard industry. You've got a lot of cost, you've got a lot of variables, your profit margins are not huge. So it's a great one to learn from. I just wanted to make that side note. And, so many clients are just winging it. And I'm going to come from this from another positioning on what we're talking about. I feel like so many make decisions before they even calculate, whether it's signing a lease, hiring somebody, they're just
Yeah.
winging it and going with it. And in that, everything you just said, I want to approach it from another side, another angle, Greg.
Mhm.
Everything you said was true. If we think about it, you said you got to check this, you got to check this, you got to do this, all these action items. And what dawned on me as you were speaking, it's a mindset. The difference between a lot of the small companies and the larger ones, I'm talking larger that's managed to be in it for a while. And I'm going to use an expression I don't use. It's just one I wrote down as you were speaking. They and I'll try to communicate so you can see what I'm saying because I think there's a good mindset teaching in this. They are what I'm going to call, Greg, they're in front of the cart making the decisions behind instead of being behind it. So the small companies are like this. I'm going to kind of emulate a little bit, right? They're like, oh, and this vendor will work with me, and that's what pricing, okay. Oh, and this client wants this pricing, okay. And this employee's good. I don't want to lose them. Versus when you get to the other side, if you make it there, you're suddenly, no vendor, I'm negotiating that pricing does not work. No, we're scheduling too many people for too much time. No, we don't need that many managers. So that's the way I speak all the time. And as I'm hearing, a cohort speaking in the same manner, I'm realizing this is something that I'm trying to talk to clients a lot, that you've got to get in front. You've got to have the mindset, the confidence, the strength, the power to be the negotiator, to be the decision maker, not the receiver of whatever
Sure.
comes your way. And I feel
Yeah.
like so many of our small clients are just sitting there going, okay, whatever I have to deal with, versus going out and saying, this is what I need to instruct and this is what I need to create. Your thoughts on that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about being proactive, right? You can't just kind of jump into situations without doing your research. I have clients who are really just anxious. I need to get this loan. I need to get this funding. I said, well, where's the financial planning? And why do you want to jump into doing this so fast? Is there a lease on the table? Is the
Yeah.
landlord saying if you're gonna, I have clients who do that. I have clients, cautionary tales who kind of jump into it because they had to secure a lease and they had to get this funding. And if they didn't apply, then the lender was going to say, you need to get this done now. They jumped into it, didn't operationally plan, and they had to go and get a second loan. Because they made these missteps, and now they're trying to dig themselves out of that hole. But like you said, they're pulling in their credit cards, their personal credit cards, they're borrowing money from family members, all in hopes of catching up. But there was poor operational planning in the beginning. That's why I mean I have clients who want to everybody wants to open a coffee shop, right? That's something too. It's so funny because I have so many clients. Hey, I'd really like to open a coffee shop, and
I
they all
have a
want
couple right now
to
too.
they all want to open a coffee shop in like Echo Park area, right? So you're kind of looking because okay, there's like 20 billion of these things. So I have clients who are like, but I don't know anything about running a coffee shop. So I even said I was like, so why don't you consider working just at a coffee shop for 6 months, just so you could get their operational book and kind of write down ideas. I mean, we had employees who joined us. Some of our best employees when we worked at a QSR sandwich shop came from Subway, and they looked at, they brought those practices that they had or other areas into the fold, and we incorporated them into the practices. But when I make those suggestions, people be like, I'm not going to work at a coffee shop. I want to be a business owner. But it's part of learning, right? It's part of the learning process is understanding operations. I go back to my attorney clients because in my own private firm practice, I have some attorney clients I work with, and some of them are brilliant, brilliant legal minds that they really specialize. I have clients that are the top in their game in their area, in that area of law, but they just don't know how to run a business. Because in law school, no one teaches you how to run a
No,
business. They
no.
just teach you how to go into the court and slay the dragon. So, he's my clients, they make these great money and they have these great successes, but then for some reason they're looking at the balance sheet. They haven't paid their taxes since 2021. They're looking at it's like,
Oh yeah.
what's going on? And then when we dial in, it's like, oh yeah, you don't have any time to spend with your family, or you can't pursue your own interests because you're bogged down in this everyday drudgery, right? Because you're not allocating the assignments to your paralegals or your legal assistant. So I spend a lot of time working with them, kind of carving out operational protocols. And it's the very same thing, Lori, God's honest truth, that I tell my small business restaurant clients, my small business, service-based clients. I have clients who are in medical professions like PT offices, chiropractors. They all follow the same rule, is that we need to have those operational guidelines in place so we're not just wasting money. Because when we really dial into the numbers, you're going to see that a lot of the profitability that's coming in. I have clients who are very profitable, and at the end of the year, they're like, wait, where'd all my money go? Because when I look at your transactions, you're spending more than you're actually putting in the account. But the illusion is that you're making money because the merchant services keep flowing. But
Oh yeah.
what we didn't do was gauge the seasonality of your sales cycle for when you go through those leaner months, when you don't have those customers, when you don't have those cases, when you don't have those patients, and then your reserve capital is unavailable because you were pulling too much.
Yeah, many people just see their entrepreneurial lifestyle like when they were an employer and there was continuity to the
Mhm.
payments, and they're not.
Sure.
One of the things that you said that I talk a lot about is I think that today too many social media kind of assisting in this is giving the impression, especially for younger entrepreneurs, that they need to jump into owning their own company at first. Now, Greg, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but I'm just saying there is a lot of benefit to being paid for your education by being an employee first.
Mhm.
And you got
Sure.
time on your hands. And you mentioned that getting a job in a coffee shop, and I tell people all the time, you don't know what you can benefit by just being an employee and just sitting back and learning. I want to go in a different direction on something completely different on this, Greg, and tell me, your thoughts on this. And like I said, don't have to agree with me at all. With a restaurant, they have a lot of, I'm going to call it SKUs. They don't talk about it being SKUs, but it's SKUs nevertheless, right? And one of the things that bigger companies start to understand is to limit the amount of SKUs. You get too many SKUs, you're all over the place, you're not efficient, etc. But when the small companies start, they want, if they're distributing products, they want to find every product to distribute. If they're creating things, they want to create a million new products. If they're offering services, they want to be all over. And they don't realize that you lose efficiency and profitability if you
Sure.
have too many SKUs. And I figured, being in the restaurant business, this is a topic, too many menu items. We're going to transfer it from SKUs to
Sure.
menu items. But I can see you already resonating with what I'm saying. You can't, just because you're desiring to create new and make offerings, go forth. And I see this hurting a lot of clients. So comment on
Sure.
this, Craig.
Yeah, so again, everything you say, I feel like I just had a session about this. I was talking to him the other day. He's trying to transition into a CPG, a consumer packaged good, and he wants to offer his goods of what he sells out of his shop through retails. And we've connected with a distributor. The distributor is very reputable. We're talking about it, and I said, listen, I said, we're going to only focus on the top three sellers for now, right? We
Yep.
want to select based on ease of making in terms of sourcing these things. The cost of goods has to be, fit within the parameters of not only your retail cost but your wholesale cost, because we're going to be dealing in volume. We're going to need to calculate how much we need to hit for that profitability threshold, and then risk of spoilage or risk of not being able to source that, right? So we don't want to get kiwis flown in from some tropical paradise, right?
Yeah,
We want
exactly.
something that you could source
Yeah,
here in California, because if anything taught us during COVID and all those problems that we had during there is that, supply chain issues can destroy a business. So
yeah,
I'm right. You're right on the money with that in terms of just looking at minimizing your approach. Now, when you talk about menu design, if we have a restaurant, yes, I say, listen, we need to dial into what are the most profitable. What are the stars on your menu, right? What are the things that are just going to be highly profitable? They're relatively low cost to put together. Your customers know them. They're always going to order them. They're going to be the thing that keeps the lights on. It's what you're known for. And then how do we eliminate the dogs, right? The dogs are stuff that just doesn't sell. When I run into these types of menu items, these are people, business owners, like, you know what? That's my grandmom's recipe. I really love it. It's just been in my family. If I took that off the menu, it would just be heartbreaking. They start going into emotional logic. But if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. So
yeah,
we got to
yeah.
execute. We got to cut it. And then you have your puzzles, which sometimes do well. Sometimes they don't. We have to figure out why. They have the potential to be a star, but we need to dial into metrics. We need to go through your point of sale. We need to look at when they're selling. Maybe it's because they only sell a certain time of day. Maybe they only sell in the afternoon. Maybe they only sell on the weekends, but they have the potential to be something more, but they need more analysis. And then you have plow horses, which are just, menu items that are going to move. They're not always they're going to be the most popular, like a star. They have a definite potential to be a star, but they're just, things you keep on the menu item because they're second tier. They do run in the supporting lineup, if we're going to make a sports analogy. And we have to really kind of track those, because if we make a tweak or we change a measurement, or we perhaps include it in a prefix, or maybe even a happy hour special to introduce to why they're successful, they probably can become one of those items. So when I break down, every menu item falls into one of those four categories. And when I go over menu costs, I have my clients understand that you need to go by measurements. It's not just a handful of greens and then, like, I grab a slab of meat and throw it into the salad.
Right,
You need
right.
to pre-portion things. When I ran my business, client for my staff rather was doing prep in the mornings for the day, sometimes at night, and then we would pull things out and have them for the following day. But a lot of my clients now, they're pre-measuring and they're pre-sorting, like especially like things like dairy cheeses, protein meats, and higher end cost things that are vegan or gluten free, or have a certain dietary restriction that associates a higher cost. We need to be careful with those things. We also need to be careful of stowage, and we need to make sure that we're putting things away and we're receiving things and counting in. It has to do with accounts receivable, right? I have clients who are going through their invoices, and it's like, well, why are your accounts receivable higher in this month than they were last month, when your sales don't demonstrate a need for that? And then they're going to go back and be like, oh yeah, I realized that we went through a case of this because this was wasted. So again, it goes back to my original statement. Numbers always tell the story. I think that we need to dive into our analytics. That's where, right now, point of sales are so advanced. I mean, you could get like a
Yeah,
basic, like Square system, and have an
yeah,
understanding of where your sales are coming in, right? And
yeah,
what time of day. And again, we're also not only going to look at cost of goods, Lloyd, but we're going to look at labor. Like, are we scheduling strategically our staff during the busier times to deal with that foot traffic, right? And then are we cutting or pulling people appropriately when things slow down, or do we have employees transitioning over to other areas, cleaning tasks, equipment resets, things like that, accounts, when vendors come in receivable, we have to look at that and time it appropriately, because nothing is worse than having a client or customer come in and there's no hands on deck, right? So you're just kind of
yeah,
wandering around waiting to be
right.
served. So
Yeah,
I have clients who are dealing with that. I have clients who are dealing with a lot of labor issues because of here in California. It's really hard for small business owners to compete with those wages, right? So we have the bigger guys, the McDonald's and the different paying $20+ an hour. And gosh, I mean, the LA minimum wage is almost at that. But
yeah,
owners are struggling just to make that basic $17 to $19 an hour,
yeah,
whatever it is now. So it's a struggle. So how do we get good, competent people in a position to help the business get along. And a lot of times the owner is rolling up their sleeves. I have so many clients that are just doing it themselves, right? And they're the main staff person, and they have one or two people helping them until they can get to that profitability. But I think they are hurting themselves by not doing that analysis because they're chaining themselves to the desk, so to speak, just doing these everyday tasks when really if they did the cost analysis and they had the profitability, they can afford the labor to bring in more people to take over those everyday tasks so they can grow the business.
Speaking of just hard to compete in the restaurant business, and I'm probably not going to use the right terminology, Greg, but you might know what I'm speaking about as I, fumble through this. But one of the things I find really interesting about let's just call it the restaurant, let's call it the food industry. So I'm
Mhm.
speaking a lot about individuals that are maybe making a product, selling it someplace else, or making a few food items.
Mhm.
Is that over the last, and you'll correct me on all this because I'm just giving you my way in the background,
Mhm.
looking at this. But over the last 10 years, so many new business models have popped up, especially from the cottage food license.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's everything from shared kitchens to,
Sure.
and I don't know if this has a name, but where people are actually having their restaurant under a same umbrella, and they
Mhm.
actually then have private label distributions with their food products. So it seems
Sure.
like there's this whole new area of, if you got grandma's recipe and you think it might take off, and you're beyond the cottage food industry because you've grown, you can get into a shared kitchen, you can get into a shared,
Mhm.
almost like a shared restaurant area type thing.
Mhm.
You can look into all these different pop-ups and stuff. So what
Sure.
are the ways, if I just start saying I want to sell my brownies, or I want to, I'm just really got a few items, that I can make business models that are piecemealed with these new offerings, structurally, infrastructure, logistically, that are available to people in this space?
Sure. So I think what you're saying is, and I agree with the CPG market can be a little oversaturated, particularly in Southern California. Everybody has a hot sauce. Everybody has a brownie,
Yeah,
right? A cookie. Like,
yeah, right.
it's funny. I mean, my 10-year-old has a business where she makes bracelets and she has a website. So it's like it's crazy. I mean, to have a 10-year-old, but it's great. It's awesome, right? I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I think the way to do it is to, and I have a webinar on this. We talk about CPG. A lot of clients I have are looking to get into it or they are into it. Is number one, figuring out where your customer base is. You don't, I have clients who are like, I got to get into a ghost kitchen. I got to get into this. I got to get into this kitchen.
That's the word, ghost
Yeah,
kitchen.
they want to get into a shared kitchen space, or I need to find a co-packer, but they
Yeah,
haven't done the actual preliminary work of researching and figuring out, where these products are going to go, right? I mean, have they, talked or done outreach or figured out even with a distributor, right? Having a distributor is key because you're not just going to be able to walk into a Whole Foods and say, I need you to carry my product. That's going to come from, your product being introduced through a distribution channel. You're going to do sampling, or you're going to have to partner with someone who's already established there, or maybe your uncle just works at Whole Foods. So
yeah, yeah.
when we look at the how-tos and the whys, that those are usually sessions where I go into. I've had full-on hour-and-a-half sessions with clients who are looking to get into this. Generally, we want the client to understand that wholesale is vastly different than retail, right? So, direct to consumer is not the same as selling B2B. If we're selling B2B, clients sometimes forget that we have to leave a profitability margin for the merchant that is carrying your product, which means that's going
Right.
to be less upfront money for you. So how
I'm
do you?
glad you're mentioning that because I see
Right.
people price their product, then they
Yeah.
get a
Oh yeah,
distributor,
all the
then they
time.
don't change the pricing, and
Yeah.
they weren't making money to
Yeah.
being more in debt.
Right.
I always say more tired and more broke.
And they're shocked, right? They're like, wow,
Yeah,
what do I do?
totally.
So one thing when I do is I kind of have to, I don't say to pull people back into reality, right? And understand
Right. No,
there's
it's
a lot
true.
of planning that goes into this, and we have to figure out, number one, are these things selling? Like, let's look at your sales funnel. Do you have a brick and mortar? Are you selling at the farmer's market? Are you selling them online? What is your capacity? Like if you get, 25 to 50 orders a week versus, 100 to 300 order for an establishment that is part of a distribution chain, you're not going to be able to meet it and your whole operation falls apart. So we need to look at your scalability. We need to look at, once you get to a certain threshold, Cottage and Miko is not going to cut it. We need to be in a kitchen, but we also need to evaluate cost. Well, how do we measure that cost of that monthly commitment of being in that shared kitchen space when we don't have the sales data to kind of project into it? And how do we know how to even present a capital funding request to an underwriter if you don't have projections into the next 3 to 5 years? So, I always have my clients work backwards, right? So where do you want to be? What is your 3 to 5 year plan? Where are you in 10 years? Let's work backwards. And what are your goals? Are we trying to get into like a smaller mom and pop? Are we trying to get into these little kitschy, like small coffee shops? Do you have a cookie or like a little Rice Krispie square? Or are you selling something that's like a major production that requires labels, bottling, the certain packaging and frilliness that comes along with things that are showcased in those higher end markets? Do we want to be on a national level? Like, where do you want to be? So we need to figure out the scalability. We need to figure out the cost. And it all begins, ideally, what we talked about before is just costing out your menu and figuring out, what you can do in a kitchen. A lot of clients don't understand that, when they're in the shared kitchen space, there's additional fees, right? So they're not accounting for the fact that if someone is cranking out cases of your product, there's going to be a labor component introduced, right? So we have to think about training. When we did CPG, we had a product that was in Whole Foods for about 2 years, and we worked with a distributor. But we did what you shared. We were manufacturing in house, and then when we tried to get into a snack line and do different things, we went into a shared kitchen space, and we actually had to train the workers in the facility to follow a recipe. And then, as there was no need for oversight, we pulled our managers back, and that labor cost reduced for us. But we need to plan, right? You can't just, like you said, throw things in and just see what works.
Yeah.
I recommend the starting points. I recommend people kind of, much like if they're looking for a brick and mortar, you don't take the first place that's offered, right? We do a lot of shop. We look at, the listings, we do comps, we try to talk to brokers, we try to understand, what the average cost per square foot is, right? And then when they're looking at shared kitchen spaces, is there equipment included? Is there a labor component? Like, how much storage do I need? Do they have a pickup refrigerator slash freezer where distributors can just come and pick up, or do I have to be there every single time to facilitate this delivery order? And then, when we are operating, what is your reserve capital? Do you have enough for free fills, comps, samplings? When I have clients who are trying to get into like a Whole Foods, right? They forget that you need to allocate, several cases to just be in store and do those samplings and get your product moving, right? So we have to, give comps, and then there's always chargebacks, right? Oh, this amount of spoiled, so we're not paying for these, so we're going to deduct that from your invoice. And then you look and you'll be like, wow, I hardly made any money. So we need to plan ahead and then kind of plan for those unforeseen things. And I use Whole Foods as an example because we were in Whole Foods. They're notorious for beating down people on price, right? So you have to
They
have a
are.
firm
Yeah.
understanding of where your product profitability is and what it's going to cost you per unit, and then go to them. And to your point that you said earlier, you don't come in sheepishly, you come in aggressive. This is my line, this is where my cost is, so I can offer you this, this, and this. And there's going to be pushback, so you allocate, okay, maybe I can bring it down by 50, 75 cents a unit. Maybe you say if there's a certain case number, like after 3 to 5 cases, the price goes down to this. But those strategies, again, won't materialize until we know our numbers, we know our measurements, and we know our cost, and we're locked in on what that profitability threshold needs to be.
And I think too many companies, I'm going to say across the board, get into these I call them highfalutin strategies where they got to be in this distribution, they got to be in wholesale into Whole Foods or whatever it is for their product line. And they're not ready and they don't have the profit margins, and it ends up harming them. Costco's,
Yeah.
what have you, right? So
Mhm.
I think that too often it's portrayed as the only road and the best road. I have several clients that I had them put on the brakes and backpedal and go to smaller local
Sure.
merchants, put
Yeah.
their stuff in those places because A, they weren't competing with everybody. B, they didn't have to have as much inventory. C, they could own the market margins and then own the market, right? So they could set the selling price. So I
Yeah.
have somebody that was distributing in Whole Foods and everything. They weren't making any money. They were getting beat up. I said, pull it off the shelf and start going to the local little grocery stores, the little mom and pops, distribute through that. And they ended up going national by just going into a state, booking a hotel, going into the local places, knocking on the door. They became their own. I said, I said, you like to travel? They go, yeah. I go, well, why don't you book a flight and go over to whatever state you want to go in, book a
Yep.
hotel in the city and start spending a couple days knocking on the local grocery stores. And that's what they did, Greg. And now they're not back in the big distribution channels because people don't understand. They will eat the profitability alive, and you may not be able to get big enough to get profitable, and you'll just be at the losing end. Now, I'm not saying that those are not good strategies, but I'm just saying that an overview of all strategies. And sometimes I call it, it's a personal word that I use a lot for myself. I know it sounds pretty strange, but I call it the pathway of insignificance. Everybody's trying to be so significant out there. I find that when I follow the pathway of insignificance, I fly under the radar and I come away with all the goods at the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great philosophy. I'm in total agreement with that. I
You know,
think, go
oh,
ahead.
I,
No, no, no.
I would just
I
say,
was going
what
to say, I think if more clients just kind of had that approach, it's like you said, there's this syndrome where people just have to hurry up and get it done.
yeah.
They don't want to put the planning, because if you had put, like you said, put the brakes on things and kind of look at things from a number analysis perspective, you slow and steady is always going to win the race over just fast paced jumping into something.
There's that old analogy, and you guys can put it in the chat. I always get my sayings wrong. I throw out the baby and not the bathwater. I always mess it up.
Mhm.
But it's this question, and I remember from a long time ago, do you want to be rich or famous? Which side of the coin you're on, right? Not saying that you need to be rich or famous, but this concept, right? And everybody knows my expression. But you can't buy a quart of milk. Okay, I've said this how many times? I listen to people and they're talking and they're going on. I go, yeah, but can you buy a quart of milk? I started doing that when I was a professor at USC. People are like, I'm going to do this. I go, can you buy a damn quart of milk? If you can't buy a damn quart of milk, it doesn't friggin' matter, right? So I've always built this on, I would rather have money and some time and freedom and sleep at night and be comfortable than bragging rights. But that's just me, because I think at the end of the day, money buys not happiness, but comfort. And I like comfort.
Well, I think money buys freedom, and that's the most
Freedom.
important. Yeah,
That's the
you
word.
want the freedom to pursue. I have one of my attorney clients. All he wants to do is spend more time on his boat. He's a boat guy. He likes his athletics. He plays different tennis, different things. I said, so let's work from that, right? Like, he's not hurting for cases. He's hurting for organizational revamp, so we can have time at the end of the day to extend his Friday to be that third weekend day, so he can spend more time doing what he wants to do. He doesn't care about the money. I mean, he cares about the money because it keeps him,
Right.
but he wants
Right.
more time. And I think the more time I spend with clients, it's evident to me that time is something you can't get back, right? So we
No.
need to figure out how to invest in giving you more time. I'm reminded of a story that was told to me by an attorney client of mine. He once said to me, he said, I envision my day and I'm carrying around this bucket, and in the bucket, there's a bucket of water, like one of those big Home Depot buckets. Every time someone talks to me, every time I answer a call, every time an employee has a question, every time a client has to bend my ear, there's a ladle that takes out of that bucket. And
Yeah.
my question to you is, at the end of the day, how much water do you want left in your bucket?
Bucket. It's so true. I remember I used to think, in my life, the way I had been living in my 20s and 30s is I had a deck of cards and I gave the last card away at the end of the day and I had no more cards. And it's so true. And I'm not saying it's by age, it's just I started looking at things and saying what really matters. And I use this word just kind of, maybe not the best word to use, but when the media makes things get sexy, suddenly it gets out of control and people start chasing it without really thinking. I
Yeah,
think over the last decade, social media made entrepreneurship too sexy, if I can just say it that
yeah,
way.
I agree.
And so suddenly everybody's, everybody is going to be the famous actor, if you will, but not realizing how many are just waiting tables, right? And so the nuts and bolts mentality that the mom and pops always had and was just part of their being has gone out the door to, oh my God, and then I'm going to grow and I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do this. And it's all these fake stories. I call them fake stories on social media because what literally so many times I've seen like people be famous and then they come to me especially when I was a banker for a loan. I'm like, oh my God, you're in debt. How do you sleep at night? So you
Mhm.
really don't know the whole story behind the scenes. That's one of the reasons I create Small Biz Talk, to hear the real story. But I think that so many are getting on this falsehood of belief of what entrepreneurship is and getting caught in the craze and
Mhm.
missing the nuts and bolts until it's too late. And then they're having to retrieve, quit,
Sure.
or start over. And I'm trying to like say, hey guys, let's look at what really matters and let's look at the nuts and bolts, because it doesn't matter whether you're in a recession or whatever you're in, you can always find a business model tweak to get the quarter mil.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I deal with clients who say, well, they don't want the business advice. They don't want to go through everything. They want to know, do you have any grants? Do you
Yeah.
have,
Oh my
do you have
God.
any
Don't even
grants?
start there. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Don't even
yeah,
go there. I
I,
was going to go there before we
oh, yeah.
ended. So this is actually perfect because
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
going to come back
So
and say something
I
to you.
say, well, what is your plan, right? And then it's like, oh, maybe I'll just get an SBA loan. I definitely don't want to invest my own money. So, okay, well, where are we with the plan and where are your financial projections? And if we do get to projections, I'm like, hey, you have like $1 million in your first year. Where are you pulling these numbers from? You don't have any business history. So
Yeah.
when I tell them we need to go back, and even if you have 6 months of business history, even if you're selling at a farmer's market, we need to show traction. We need to show scalability, right? We need to be able to communicate a narrative. My job as your SBDC advisor, if you're looking for funding, is to craft a narrative that makes sense to an underwriter, but it has to be based and buttressed by some sort of metric that's based in reality, right? We have to
It
pull
does.
from,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
know you deal with this because of your history with lending SBA. So,
Yeah.
you could definitely speak to this, but I mean, I think clients, they have this, it might just be what you said about the social media. They have this big misunderstanding that, oh, I could just get a loan from the government and I can have this money to start my business without a solid plan or even projections.
I mean, the fact of the matter, so many people say, well, I'm going to get funding, I'm going to get a loan, I'm going to get a grant, all this stuff. And
Mhm.
as I always say, the fact of the matter is actually mathematically been proven by research, but like 99.9% of the companies are funded by what I call friends, family, and fools.
Oh,
That's,
that's good.
people you can convince to invest in it. The fact is, SBA loans are personal guaranteed. It is your friggin' money. Don't think it's not. It's your money you're investing. And most people can't get a loan unless they put their home equity up, which that's your money. And that's why I think the incremental put the toe in the water strategy and grow organically has great benefits. Now there's business models like the medical industry, et cetera, or even the entertainment. You got to get the film out of the can. You can't do anything without having an investor. I'm not speaking to those kind of business models. I'm speaking to the ones where get the brownies in Whole Foods when I just baked the first recipe. Those are the ones that I'm speaking to. I know we only got a few minutes, so I can't comment too much on this one, but you had mentioned COVID. I know the restaurant industry took a hit after COVID and still is taking a hit. Are you finding that not only is it kind of surviving and coming back, but that's what maybe also led to these ghost kitchens and these other ways of doing business within that industry during COVID? It seems to me like after COVID, these alternative methods of infrastructure production, distribution, et cetera, really hit big. And I think the restaurant industry is one of them that's still lagging since
Sure.
COVID. Am I correct on
No,
that?
I had a recent talk with the illustrious Brad Pollock from Long Beach City College the other day, and we talked about a lot of time is spent just going through lease negotiations. One thing that COVID exposed was landlord greed. I mean, I have so many stories
Yeah.
of just landlords being extremely unreasonable and clients fighting tooth and nail, and then these rent carryovers from 2021, 2022, 2023. You know,
Oh, they were
but
brutal. They were
yeah,
brutal. The way that they negotiate, nobody got off on the rent. They put it in arrears like a balloon payment, and
yeah,
then it hit the restaurants big time. Absolutely. Oh, we're out of time, but we could
of
talk about
course.
that quite a lot.
Yeah.
I was on the restaurant revitalization grants too and
Okay.
helping with those. So yeah,
Great.
painful.
Yeah.
Had a lot of restaurants close after that. Well,
Mhm.
Greg, we got to go. You've been
Yeah.
a wealth of information,
Okay.
and my participation on what I want to say is that everything you spoke about can be transferred and is transferred to every single business model out there, whether you're a solopreneur or a large company with staff. The SKUs, the cost of goods, knowing the numbers, the negotiation, everything we talked about applies to you. It really does. So it was a great conversation. Any last comments for the audience as we close for today?
I just want to encourage anyone, any business owner, if you're looking to start a business, reach out to your local SBDC.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm going to tell people come to PCR SBDC because we have our own internal finance department. But if you're, PCR is amazing. They just opened a new facility, like a physical facility in the Crenshaw area, and we're very proud to be a part of that community. Colette, our director, is an amazing leader. We have China, Briogeny helps me through every webinar I could possibly do it. Mark Robinson, an amazing, amazing CEO, man of God, great guy. And if you need help with small businesses and you happen to be in the Long Beach area, Long Beach City College, Brad Pollock, an amazing human being, great guy, great mentor, really cares about small business. I guess if I'm going to close with anything, I'm going to close with how thankful I am to be affiliated with the SBDC and as advisor. I'm going on my seventh year, and I'm working with different SBDC offices. I know you do as well, Lori. And I think just encountering the level of clients that we meet makes me a better advisor, not only for my SBDC clients, but for my clients in my own firm. And I have a lot of clients that I kind of reference what's going on with my SBDC clients. So I really appreciate, hearing what's going on out there and how my clients are pivoting around these financial challenges because it helps me to help them get to the next level. And the success stories are that much more rewarding when you know that they took the ball and they ran with it. So yeah,
Yeah.
the SBDC, and it's an amazing place to be. I encourage anyone to take advantage of this. It's a no-cost program. Please reach out, get an appointment with your advisor. We're here to help you.
Sadie, I think Greg's one of our greatest spokespeople for SBDC. What do you think?
I mean, I already knew it was going to be an amazing session because, like, as folks know, we do our prep beforehand. And I mean, like, it got to the point where we're like, whoa, 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 we actually got to start this, the webinar. I mean, the passion here is off the charts. I love it.
Thank you.
It is. Okay, guys, as always, Sadie stays behind. You can get Greg's information, contact him. Also, the SBDC's information, my information, if you want to get in touch with me. I've got to close for today. So I say, Greg, thank you so much. We're going to have you back on because we can
Sure.
talk for hours and hours. So you're going to have to come back on the show. And to everybody, thank you. If you're brand new, please tune in again. If you're one of my frequent flyers, love seeing you here every week. And thank you for joining Lori Williams for Small Biz Talk. And I'll see everybody next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye, Greg and
Thank you,
Sadie.
guys. Thank you so much
Bye,
for your time.
Lori. Bye, Greg.
Have a great day,
All
guys.
righty,
Bye-bye.
guys. It was awesome. Hey, guys. So you know how the drill is. I'm gonna hang out for a little bit. I put everything in there that I think that we need. But if there's something in particular that you're like, Sadie, I need this link, or what about this information? Let me know so I can drop that right back in there. Oh, dude, the love. I definitely do feel the love. Great session today, right? But then I guess by default, I say, when is it not a great session, right? I mean, I love our small biz community over here. So I'm gonna hang back by a few just so you guys can do click around. But I did see somebody say about Brad at the LBCC. He's actually a director, so I don't know if you'll actually be able to get an advisor appointment with him. But that's why I put down the main phone number for just the Los Angeles area because you don't know what center is right for you. Maybe you have a closer one. We do virtual appointments. Maybe you want to go in person. Like I said, we can do a little mix and match of the flavor over there. So definitely reach out. These are your tax dollars at work. As you can see, our business advisors are subject matter experts. So, I mean, folks, why not talk to the best of the best in the Los Angeles area? So on that note, I'm going to put myself on mute. Yes, stay hydrated, definitely. Oh my God, I had to make sure I walked my dog before we started today's session because it was hot dogs out there and it wasn't even 10 o'clock in the morning. So stay fresh, stay cool, and we will see you next week. Don't worry, I'm still living this open, just going on mute.